So tonight we have Paul Vink coming to talk to us, and I just want to intro him briefly. I work for Paul, but before I worked for Paul as a labourer, I knew him well. I was best friends with one of his sons for many years, had many a sleepover in their lounge, which was a lot of fun. And he's a thinker and a doer. And I want to ask you to welcome him up here to talk to us. Please give him a round of applause. Also, in Paul's world, when he looks at the nutritional pyramid, the bottom isn't full of pasta and that kind of thing. It's pretty much completely taken up by various nuts. And seeds. That's important. And so these are for you for during the time, and these are to take home afterwards. Okay, and you can do with those whatever you want. There we go. No problem.
It's awesome. Well, we can't say who told us, but the person who told us said that we should bake you a cake and cover it with seeds. Didn't happen, but you got a bowl of nuts.
Well, it's great to be here and to talk about what really matters to me anyway. I'd like to just start by reading a piece from a foreword from a book by Jeffrey Sachs, The End of Poverty. It's just a few bits. We could be the first generation to outlaw this kind of extreme, stupid poverty that sees a child die of hunger in a world of plenty. Future generations flipping through these pages will know whether we answered the key question. The evidence will be the world around them. History will be our judge, but what's written is up to us. Who we are, who we've been, what we want to be remembered for. We can't say our generation didn't know how to do it. We can't say our generation couldn't afford to do it. We can't say our generation didn't have reason to do it. So it's up to us. We can choose to shift the responsibility, or we can choose to shift the paradigm. I've been asked to just talk with you a little bit about my own journey, and I wouldn't say trying to be part of that generation, because I'm not sure that I really am. I think I'm past that generation, and I don't think that I'll be alive when this vision is fulfilled, but I think some of you potentially might be. I hope you will be. And that, so at least to share my journey in this direction. I can't go right back to when it started, because that would make my story a bit too long, but I'd like to go back about 3 or 4 years when Carla, my colleague, and I got together, and we decided that we realised what we couldn't do, which was we didn't, well, I didn't, Carla might have felt differently, but I knew that I didn't have enough years or enough ability or enough understanding or knowledge to interact directly with people in poverty and help them to find a way out of it. But I did feel that perhaps I could help those who were really doing it, and probably doing it far better than I could ever do it. And I just imagined that they would be people who lived in those communities, who knew those communities well. So what Carla and I decided we would do is to spend as much time as it needed, and it took longer than we thought, to basically scan the world, every continent, every country that we could, and try and find out who we felt was doing the very best job in alleviating poverty. Now, we kind of honed it down a little bit to what we called, what what we call now less complex poverty. That's a phrase that I haven't come across in the literature, but it's become quite an important guiding principle for us. And what we mean by less complex poverty is people who are poor without the complexities that are so often associated with people who are living in poor communities. Complexities like war, like natural disaster, like vices like addiction, prostitution, all those kind of added complications to just trying to survive. So we defined less complex poverty as people who weren't struggling against those odds on top of just struggling to survive. Okay, so less complex poverty. So we kind of limited our search for development programs that were working in those communities. So the first criteria was facilitating holistic community development, communities that are amongst the poorest of the poor. I should make that distinction, that just because a community is, in the way we define, experiencing less complex poverty, that doesn't mean to say the people aren't incredibly poor. In fact, often those communities where the poverty is less complex, some of those communities are the poorest. They're poorer, for example, than where a lot of the complexities occur, which is in the urban slums, where generally people in the urban slums, they have a slightly higher standard of living than people that live in more rural areas where the poverty is less complex. So please, when I say less complex poverty, please don't hear less poor, you know, better, people that are better off. They are very poor, but their poverty is less complex. Right? So that was our target, people that are the poorest of the poor but are experiencing less complex poverty. The next kind of principle, the guiding principle in terms of the lens, if you like, that we look through in trying to find the most effective poverty alleviation strategy was the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm. And we became aware as we started doing more and more research, there's so much material that was coming from people that they weren't just outsiders that were kind of throwing stones and pointing fingers at those people that are doing development, but they were insiders, people that had been given their lives to alleviating poverty and realising at the end of a dedicated life to this cause that in fact a lot of harm had been done. And so that was one of the things that we were very strong on in our search. First, do no harm. And then the next one is asking the question, okay, so what does it mean to alleviate poverty? What are we trying to do? And what I realised, that I just made the automatic assumption, okay, so poverty means a lack of resources, so therefore you're helping people to have more resources, because more resources means an absence of poverty. And my assumption was more resources, life will be better, people will be happier. It took a little while for me with a bit of help from Carla, to begin to start realising that in fact those two things aren't necessarily correlated at all, and that part of this Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm, was that in fact there are countless examples of communities that had experienced development, had received aid, and their standard of living had gone up, but their community had become fractured and broken, and many of the traditions and communal practices, what I think Carla referred to as social capital, had gone. And so, sure, they had cell phones and they had motorbikes and they had TVs, but their relationships, their cooperation, their sense of family and history and tradition and belonging had also gone.